$100,000 is a huge milestone on your investing journey. Here's why. So I've got a spreadsheet here showing how a potential person's investing journey could go, starting with nothing. For example, if you were able to save $500 a month, $6,000 a year, I've got an assumed rate of return here of 6%. And so when you put in $6,000, it grows by 360. That's the 6%. At the end of the year, you end up with 6,360. The second year, you start at 6,360, add another 6. The growth is growing more than it did the previous year because there's the magic of compound growth happening right there. So as you go along, adding your 6,000 or your $500 a month at a 6% rate of return. Again, this is just an average. This is hypothetical, but just a 6% average gets you to $100,000 somewhere in year 12. Now, after that point, even though you're investing $6,000 a year, after that point, because you have so much more invested, the growth on top of the entire previous balance plus whatever you're putting in ends up being more than the amount that you're putting in every year. So the growth is actually doing all of the heavy lifting beyond that point. It definitely still helps, especially in these years between 12 and year 20, but the growth on the account is larger in this case than what you're putting in every year. So the 6% number is just in the ballpark of what you would expect on a go-forward basis with a globally diversified equity portfolio, some Canada, some US, some international, of course. And so this isn't going to be exactly your experience necessarily. It could be better, it could be worse, but this is just for illustration's sake. So if you're trying to get to $100,000 faster, what do you think is more important, to invest more or to get a better rate of return? Well, let's try both and let's see. So let's try both. Let's start by doubling your rate of return and see what happens. Again, I don't recommend that people assume that you're going to get 12% a year, but just for illustration's sake, let's take a peek. So same new investment amount. So that's $6,000 per year, but now you're getting 12%. So previously you hit the 100,000 somewhere in year 12. And in this case, it happens in year 10. So it knocks off a couple of years. Not bad, but not really that drastic. Okay, so this tells me that the rate of return in the early years, it's helpful, but it doesn't matter that much. Increasing rate of return, of course, everybody wants to do that, but optimizing for minutiae of changes in rate of return, that can be done later and have a greater impact later. So let's go back to 6% here. And then what happens if we double this? Yeah, that's, wouldn't it be nice to just be able to just double how much you're investing every month? But again, this is just for illustration's sake. Let's take a look. So if you were to double your investment to $12,000, so this is $1,000 a month, then you'd hit $100,000 total account balance somewhere in year 7. And so you can see how much your savings rate in the early years really matters so much more than your rate of return. If we go back to 6% or $6,000 per year, and we can even do a crazy number like 25% per year, you're still only getting it in that 7th year as well. So it's kind of ridiculous to assume you can get a 25% rate of return guaranteed every year. It's not going to happen. And so the easier thing to do for most people is to steadily increase how much they're investing every year, especially until you get to that $100,000 where kind of that hump is crossed and your growth can start taking care of it a little bit more for you. So coming up with money to invest isn't easy, especially with inflation the way it is. Everything's just getting more and more expensive. It's tough. And so using a few tools in our Canadian financial planning tool belt, we can help accelerate this process a little bit more. Using an RSP can be a great way to build your retirement savings and do it quickly. When you contribute to an RSP, you get a deduction on your income for the amount that you put into your RSP. So if you have already prepaid taxes from your employer, that means that you're likely to get a refund based on the amount of money that you put into your RSP and what your tax rate is. Let's have a look and see what that could look like. So if you earn $75,000 in Canada and you're making a $6,000 RSP contribution like I showed in the previous example, this is how much you can expect to receive as a refund just attributed to the RSP contribution part of your tax return. So I'm here in Saskatchewan, and so if you made $75,000 a year and then you invested $6,000 into your RSP, you can expect to get $1,980 back just from the RSP contribution. This doesn't factor in all your other deductions or tax credits or anything like that. This is just kind of back of the napkin here. If you're in Ontario, $1,779. If you're in British Columbia, $1,692. So you're kind of all in this ballpark, but as high as about $2,200 in the Maritimes here. Nova Scotia's got a pretty decent number as well, and then as low as $1,692. Again, this is just for $75,000. If you had income much higher than that, let's say double, for example, that will move you up a number of tax brackets in most provinces, and so that means that you're likely to get a larger refund because it reduces your top line income so that you can get a larger refund. So again, here in Saskatchewan, I could get for that same $6,000 contribution, if my income was that high, I would get a refund of $2,335. So back to the spreadsheet here. If you are investing this $6,000 into an RSP, again, let's just assume that you're in that $75,000 income range, you can expect, depending on your province, in the ballpark of $1,800 as a refund from making that as an RSP contribution. So let's just see what this looks like if we now, instead of investing $6,000 only, if we take that refund and we also invest that. So if I change this $6,000 to $7,800, instead of reaching $100,000 in 12 years, now we knock off 2 full years on our path to $100,000. So it's not huge necessarily, but it really does make a difference. So if I go back and adjust the rate of return here back up to that hypothetical 12 that we were talking about, you reach that 100,000 in that year 10. So it's not too far off the same idea. Perfect. Pretty similar there. So the same idea applies from investing your tax refund from your RSP contributions would have a very similar effect as having a 12% rate of return for the first period of time of your life. Obviously, that's going to change. The more dollars you have at play, the more the rate of return really matters, but that's kind of what we're talking about here today. So I don't want to get anybody too confused here, but just the idea of getting to $100,000 makes a difference because after that, the growth rate of your investment can actually carry the lifetime growth of the account much more than your contributions likely can. If your income is extremely high, then your number is going to be probably a whole lot higher than 100,000. But that's kind of that milestone that many people try to hit first. So getting your first $100,000 invested in the market can be really hard, but the best way to do that without coming up with money out of your own pocket is just to take your tax refund and invest that too. You could use that in your TFSA. You could put it back into your RSP, whatever you decide to do, but both of those are pretty good options. So this is how investing your tax refund can really accelerate your path towards $100,000 without cutting out all your expenses and living off rice and beans entirely. It's just a little tweak that instead of spending that portion of your tax refund, you just know in advance that you're going to allocate that towards long-term investing. It can really help and make a difference on your path to $100,000. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in another video.